Hello, and welcome to the DRC Insight Technology Training for the Wisconsin Forward test window that's coming up in the spring of 2020. This is the first of two webinars. This webinar has a little bit more detail in terms of technology setup. It's targeted as really a more detailed overview for DTCs. And targeted really at also new DTCs. So if we'll get into a lot more of the technology setup during this webinar. So if you're interested in just the overview, check out the other webinar that's out there that's targeted more at the as an overview of our technology solution for advance of the testing window. So during this webinar, we're going to talk about several things. We're going to start out first with going through some of the key dates that you need to be aware of. We're going to then do a quick overview of terminology that I'll be using through the presentation. And terminology is really about the DRC Insight technology that we kind of want to use going forward whenever we're referring to any of the DRC Insight applications and solutions. Then we're going to talk real quickly about what's changing for the 2020 administration and what's not changing, just to ground everybody on what to expect going into the 2020 forward administration. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about both the system requirements and the network requirements. Then we'll do a quick overview of the DRC Insight solution and dive into the setting up of the technology, and then wrap up with a review of all the different support resources that are available to support you during the setup and during testing. So let's start out with the key dates. As of November 14th, all of the technology readiness resources are available on both the Wisconsin Forward website and the DRC Insight portal. We're going through those resources, later on in the presentation. This presentation will be available, or was available on the 21st. We will also have a couple more webinars planned to do more of a Q&A. So those will be live webinars, a little bit of training, any questions you guys have, and do an overview. And that will be on January 15th, and then February 12th, and then March 11th. Also, a date that's coming up in January 22nd, all of the student data will be pulled and uploaded into the DRC Insight portal or eDirect. And then, of course, the real critical dates here are that everything is ready to go when the test window opens on March 23rd, and that runs through May 1st. It's really important that you keep up to date with these dates, so we recommend that you check the Forward exam calendar website regularly to stay current on anything that's coming up. So from a terminology standpoint, again, we'll get into what all these things are later on in the presentation. But I just want to, again, ground everybody on the terminology I'm going to be using and how we want to refer to things going forward. So the first one is the DRC Insight Secure Applications. This is the application that is installed on each testing device to create a secure testing experience. And we support kind of two different versions of that. One is the DRC Insight Secure browsers, which run on the Windows, Mac, and Linux platforms, and those are available the DRC Insight portal. And then the DRC Insight Secure apps that are available in the app stores for the corresponding vendors' websites for Chrome, for Apple iPads, and for Windows 10 and S mode. We'll talk again in a few minutes about where, a little bit more about in detail on that. The other term that we want to just refresh everyone on is the DRC Insight Test Engine. That is different than the DRC Insight Secure Applications. You don't have to install that. That comes down when the student launches the DRC Insight app, and that is really where all of the testing content and the student interaction is happening within that test engine. The other application is the DRC Insight Portal, formerly known as eDirect. So we'll be referring to that in this presentation, pretty frequently as the DRC Insight Portal or the DRC Insight Portal, and then in parentheses eDirect, where we make the transition from the old terminology to the new terminology as the DRC Insight Portal becomes more of that one place to go for everything. The other term that we want to kind of refresh everybody on is central office services. It's kind of been a little, we want to make sure everyone's using it correctly going forward. DRC, or the central office services, is actually the application that you're going to be using from within the DRC Insight Portal to manage your environment. And in there, you're going to manage COS configurations, and then the COS service devices, also be abbreviated as COSSD. And the COS service device is really, the main role for that is content hosting. So those are the terms that we're going to be using frequently throughout the presentation here. So let's cover real quick what's changing and what's not changing for 2020. So what's changing is we have replaced the TSM. It is now, all testing will be done using the COS service device within your COS configurations. The other thing with the TSM going away is we no longer support response caching. We support what is now called extended retries. And the real reason for that is really a shift in technology and the problems. Response caching really dealt with internet connectivity issues. Really, we're seeing now that internet is really not where the challenges are. It's really more on the wireless and the Wi-Fi connections within the classrooms. And response caching didn't really address that, or the extended retries, which we've been using really for the last year within Wisconsin, is really serving as a much better solution to keep students testing. What's being updated, again, this is something we do annually in June. The DRC Insight Secure applications were all updated in June to version 10.x. And then the COS service device was updated to version 3. So these were updated over the summer and were available in the DRC Insight Portal download pages in June. So what's not changing? I think there's been some confusion or misunderstanding of the TSM goes away, so I have to start all over, and that's not the case. Your COS configurations and your COS org unit IDs remain the same. What we're doing is we're pulling the TSM out of the configuration and putting the COS service device in. So you don't have to go back in and recreate the COS configurations. Your testing devices remain within those configurations. So if it was working for you last year, the COS configurations that work for you again this year, it's just a matter of pulling the TSM out and putting the COS service device in. And then just as a reminder, from a testing device platform standpoint, we support and have supported and continue to support all the testing devices, your operating systems you're going to see in a typical classroom: Windows, Mac, Linux, iPad, and Chrome devices. Those are not changing. So let's get into a little bit of the system requirements. We publish the system requirements 3 times a year. The main one is the one that was published at the end of June, which gives you the specifications for the testing devices and the COS service device that you can expect to use throughout the year. We do a couple other updates, one in October, which was just recently published, and then we do another update in February, right before spring testing windows really start. And in both of those, what we really address is just changes that are happening to operating systems. As you know, Microsoft and Google and Apple are regularly updating and refreshing their operating systems. So as those operating systems get refreshed or changed, we give you information about how they what our support is for those operating systems. And again, we'll see that in just a minute here. So here's the specifications for the DRC secure applications. Again, supporting Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, and now the newly released iPad OS and Chrome operating systems. The specifications are pretty consistent throughout in terms of the amount of memory. The more memory, the better. Just from a standpoint of it just gives the application more to work with to improve some responsiveness. From a disk standpoint, it really applies mainly to the Windows and Mac environment. 20 gig of available storage is best. We have the recommended or a minimum screen size more from a student experience standpoint to make sure it's 9.5 or larger. From a central office service device standpoint, it supports Windows, Mac operating system, Mac OS, and the Linux devices. One thing we want to be clear is a testing device does not have to be those operating systems. The COS service device operates independently of the testing devices. So a COS service device can be on a Windows operating system, and the testing device can be an iPad or a Chromebook, and they interact just fine. So we don't want to have any confusion here that you don't see iPad and Chrome up here for the operating systems, because those platforms just don't have enough horsepower and memory to be able to support the COS service device. But testing devices can still be there. We've now also included, as we have in the past, examples of hardware configurations, but we now use, instead of putting in a specific Intel chip and say or equivalent, we've changed to give you a little bit more information about what equivalent means by looking at the CPU benchmark. So we've used a CPU benchmark of, for example, over 3,000 to be able to support 100 concurrent users. And that way you can take your processor, go to the CPU benchmark, see where you're at, and if it's over 300, then you're good to do that. So we found that this is providing a lot more better comparison for sites to be able to say, what we've tested, DRC's tested, how does that line up to what your processors look like? Any questions on any of that as you're going through preparation, give customer service a call and they can help you, and we'll have information on customer service in a second. So from a DRC support policy standpoint, again, want to refresh folks on that. We look at it really as 4 phases. When something new comes out, it starts out as best effort support, and then moves into fully supported, and as things are retired by vendors, they move into, from a DRC standpoint, best effort support until they go to end of support. So what does that mean from an operating system standpoint? So these are the specifications that were released in October. Again, I want you to also continue to refer to the official system requirements that you can download from the DRC Insight portal, rather than looking back at this presentation, because this is where they are at this moment in time. But as you go through testing and prepare for it, make sure you're checking the updated system specifications on either the Wisconsin website or the DRC Insight portal. So as you can see, these are the operating systems that are supported, pretty comprehensive. One that is, as of right now, the newly released Mac operating system, Mac 10.15, also known as Catalina. At this moment, is still under best effort support. We go through about 30 to 60 days after a release before we can say we're fully supporting it. But generally, best effort support is you can pretty much count on things being supported as we move forward. The one other one I want to note is, from a Chrome standpoint, Google is constantly refreshing Chrome. We will support the most current version that's out there, and we will do best effort support all the way back to version 74. But again, best effort support is really pretty solid. We've tested everything at 74, and subsequent versions have been released for the DRC Insight applications, and pretty confident you're not going to run into any issues with that. Now I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about device support, because we get a lot of questions around, how DRC supports devices. And again, this mainly applies to the iPads and to the Chrome devices. DRC supports, our software supports vendor-supported devices as long as they are meeting those specifications we talked about before. So what does it mean from a vendor-supported device standpoint? It really is that once a vendor stops supporting a device, we will continue to provide best effort support for a period of time. And generally, that is going to be through a testing year, so through the end of June of 2020 in this case for this year. It really, again, as I said, applies to Apple and Chrome devices. Apple bases their iPad support model on whether or not it runs a supported operating system. So right now there's 2 operating systems that Apple supports, iOS 12 and iPadOS 13. As long as your iPad supports those operating systems, DRC will provide full support for it. Chrome has a little different, or Google has a little different approach to it. They base it based on the production date of the first production date of a model. It's not the first date it was that you purchased it. It's the date that model first went into production. And they typically support it for 6 years. So it's 6 years after its first production date. So it's something you really need to be mindful of as you're buying Chrome devices, that you look at, not that you buy it, it's going to be supported for 6 years. You have to look back to see what that first production date is. So it's always best, to consider purchasing devices using the most recent production manufacturing date that you can afford, and that'll apply to both really the iPads and to the Chromebook. So if you get a really good deal on a Chromebook, it might be because it's really kind of getting closer to that end of support date. So let's just talk a little bit more about the Chrome devices, because we're getting a lot more questions about them now that Chrome devices have been out in in use in classrooms for, coming up on that 5 or 6 year window. So again, to just reiterate, Chrome or Google has given Chrome devices an auto update expiration date. And that is, again, based on, 5 or 6 years after its first production date. Before it reaches that date, you get full support from Google. The operating systems are fully supported. But after that date, Google will no longer guarantee that updates are going to come down to it. Therefore, it's not going to guarantee that you're getting the security that updates you might need, and any functionality updates that might go into the operating system. And they also suspend your ability to manage the devices using Google Management Console. Now that varies, is going to vary a little bit device by device, but generally that's going to happen as soon as it hits the auto expiration date. So to find that information about your devices, we provided the link here to on the Google site to give you, it lists off all the different devices and what their support time frame is for them. We do want you to know that if your device, though it may have reached the auto expiration, update expiration date, if it still supports Chrome 74 or higher, we will give best effort support for it, meaning we'll continue to support it, but understanding that this will not be generally managed through the Chrome Management Console. You're going to be updating these devices manually. So therefore, there is some variability in there. So there may be some things that we may not be able to support, but we will help you as best we can through the testing year if you have a device that is running 74 or higher but has reached the auto update expiration date. So again, you can find these system requirements and specifications on the DRC Insight portal. under General Information on the Downloads tab, and you have to scroll down to the bottom. When you scroll through, there's generally a lot of downloads there. And find the View System Requirements, and you'll be able to see the latest and greatest version of it. I want to now spend a couple minutes just talking about network requirements. And this image is, I understand, it's probably kind of an eye chart. We recommend that you look at the presentation that's going to be available and download it and take a look at this slide. Gives you just really good, understanding of how traffic flows during the test. So as you're building out COS service devices before a test, that content is coming from DRC's content distribution network. We use Amazon CloudFront, and that'll be going through your firewall and being loaded up to the COS service devices wherever you have those located. Once a student starts testing, so that's when they launch the DRC Insight Secure application from their device, we will automatically download the test engine software from DRC. So you need a network, that internet connection once the student starts the test, and that's going to be about 2 meg that's coming down. So this is just something to keep in mind that if you're testing a lot of students at once, keep in mind whether or not your internet connection and your wide area network and local area network can handle that many students downloading 2 meg at once. What we find is a lot of sites will kind of stagger classrooms or stagger students within a classroom just by a few 20, 30 seconds, and in that period of time it gets them started on the test a lot smoother because that 2 meg coming down. The students will then log in, and that's not a lot of traffic going back. It's just picking up their credentials and then us sending back what kind of tests they can take. At that point in time, once they pick a test, the testing content will come down, and again, that's roughly about 2 to 5 meg, and ideally that's going to be coming down from a COS service device. But if it's not, you don't have a COS service device, or that connection is broken, that content's going to come over the internet and your local network down to the testing devices. Once the test starts, responses go back and forth, back to DRC, very small for the Wisconsin Forward test. So the thing to keep in mind is your biggest network bandwidth utilization is going to happen at the beginning of the test, when students are downloading the test engine and when they're downloading the test content. So again, a trick that a lot of sites use to be able to handle, help their network capacity is just to stagger students just a little bit in order to give them the bandwidth that's needed. So it's just something to keep in mind there. The other thing, since Wisconsin is also utilizes the WIDA access test for ELLs for your assessments, it's using the same platform. So we just want to cover that really quickly, since many of you may also be setting up for the WIDA access test that starts on December 2nd. Same technology. The only thing that's different is the content and how that content flows. WIDA has very media-rich content. So instead of where the Wisconsin Forward exam is a fixed form, it means all the content comes down at the very beginning of the test, and it's going to be 2 to 5 meg, and that comes down at the very beginning. Because WIDA has so much rich content, that content comes down question by question as the student navigates through the test. So it's a lot more network traffic that's coming down to the student's device as they navigate through the test, and that's going to be about 2 to 3 meg that's going to come down per item. The other difference is, again, from a response standpoint, for most of WIDA and the Wisconsin Forward exam, the responses coming back to DRC are under 5K. The speaking response is generally going to be over 600K. So when the students are taking the speaking test, there's a lot more traffic going over your network connection as students are speaking. So again, the impact between WIDA and the Wisconsin Forward exam is really around the network. Again, using the same testing devices, the same DRC Insight Secure application, Testing device requirements are really the same. The only difference is you need headsets with a microphone for the WIDA assessment. You're going to be also using the same DRC Insight portal or eDirect for the administration management. WIDA has their version of it called WIDA AMS, but for your standpoint, you're going to be working out of the Central Office Services application, and it is going to be the same whether or not you're using the DRC Insight portal eDirect or you're using WIDA AMS. And the nice thing now with the COS service device is you only need one hosting platform. Prior to this year, you had to have a TSM, the prior platform, one for WIDA and one for Wisconsin Forward. Now you can share that same device. The specific things you need to do for the network, I want to point you to the Technology User Guide, Volume 1 under Introduction to Online Testing. To verify the latest of the URLs that you need to whitelist. This is where they are now. They're likely to stay the same for the URLs and the ports that you need to have open on the testing devices and on your servers. But just to verify, double check it, from this list before you start testing. If at all possible, if you can wildcard drcedirect.com, that will cover a lot of these. But if your firewalls or filters or antivirus don't allow you to do that, put each one of these things in there. And the other thing that we recommend, if you can, is give the DRC Insight traffic on the network a priority. So if you can do that through, a network shaping, all the better student experience students are going to be able to get. So that covers really the information on the system specifications. Again, take a look at them online. If you have any questions on any of them, give customer service a call. They're there to help you in any way if you have questions or issues. So now we're just going to do a quick overview of the DRC Insight platform before we start talking about how to build it all out. So the key interface you're going to be working through is the DRC Insight portal, formerly known as eDirect. It is, again, the one place you go for getting things ready for the Wisconsin Forward exam. You're going to use it from a technology standpoint to get access to the DRC Insight secure applications, to download them for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and you're going to get the COS service device installers from there. This is also where you're going to find all the documentation, the checklists, and all the different links that we're talking about today for doing the testing setup. And this is also really this is the place you're going to go for setting things up using the Central Office Services configurations. And we're going to walk through that when we talk about the setup. Just keep in mind, this is also the platform that's used by test administration. This is also where all the students are set up, all test sessions are managed, and where you can go in and have monitoring of how testing is progressing and getting reports. So it is really designed now. That's why we rebranded it now the DRC Insight Portal. It's the one place to go now for all technology and all administration for the Wisconsin Forward exam. So this is, again, the login page and the link to it. So it hasn't changed. It's the same URL that we've been using for in past administrations. The look of it's changed a little bit. So this is where you log in. If for whatever reason you aren't able to log in or you don't have the right permissions to get to Central Office Services, give customer service a call, and they can assist in getting anything set up there. But all of you should have your credentials set up already. Username is your email address, and then you set up your password, and you should be able to get in and have all the access to what you need. So this is really a high-level summary of what we're going to be talking about. Really, the rest of it is Central Office Services. Central Office Services is the application within the DRC Insight portal that you're going to use to monitor and maintain COS configurations and testing devices and COS content. So what is a COS configuration? It is really this green box right here. It is what we're going to be building. And what the COS configuration does is sets up the relationship between the testing devices and where the testing content is. So every testing device has to be in a COS configuration. And in there it says, do I get the content from what COS service devices? Or if I don't have a COS service device, then it goes back to DRC for content. So again, this is where we're going to be spending, the majority of our time is building this out. Again, to summarize, COS service device, Windows, Mac, and Linux. Testing devices, Windows, Mac operating systems, Linux, iPads, and Chrome devices. They don't have to be the same. They can communicate back and forth in a mixed operating system environment. So the DRC Insight Secure Applications, as I mentioned earlier, it really has one role. Its role is to create a secure testing experience. It allows or doesn't allow students to leave the test, to go out to the internet or to go to other resources on the testing device to get an unfair advantage during the test. So its one role is to secure the testing experience. Again, the Windows, Mac OS, and Linux installers are available on the Downloads tab under General Information of the DRC Insight portal. And then the iPad operating systems, the Chrome devices, and Windows 10 and S mode are downloaded or available. Those installers are available in the app stores. So Chrome, you're going to use the Chrome Management Console to do the management and deployment to the Chrome devices. From an iPad standpoint, you're going to either download them from the store or you can download it and use Mobile Device Manager to be able to distribute it out to testing devices. The same applies to the Windows, Mac, and Linux installers. You can download them one at a time or use your software distribution mechanism of your choice to be able to move those and install those that software within your environment. The one exception to all of this is Windows 10 and S mode. It can only be installed from the Microsoft Store, and that is by Microsoft's design. It does not allow you to use software distribution at this time to distribute it. And the whole design behind Windows 10 and S mode is the only place that operating system can pull and get software through the store. So it creates a more secure experience, less chance for viruses and compromises to the operating system. The last thing to note about all of these versions is they do auto-update. So if for whatever reason, once the software is installed on the device, if we have to make an update, generally for security reasons, or to lock, to create and prevent some sort of other access backdoor, for lack of a better word, within the test for just create that secure experience, we will send an update out. We try not to do that once testing starts in the fall. But if that does happen, student launches the device. If it's not running the current DRC secure application, it will automatically download from the appropriate place and get that updated. The other thing that we do on every single install and when the student launches a test is we run what we call system readiness check. This just verifies that the device is meeting the minimum system requirements for testing and that things are operating properly. So this prevents delays on the day of testing. So if you check the system readiness check and everything is green, it's good to go. If there's anything that's yellow, it just gives you kind of a warning that there may be something you want to take a look at. If it's red, it means this testing device is not going to be able to support testing. And then it gives you more details over here as to where to go to get more information as to why. From a central office or COS service device overview standpoint, the installers for that, again, are on the DRC Insight portal on the downloads page. They also automatically update whenever there's any new versions to COS service device. We really recommend, if you can, that you install that on a dedicated device or machine. It can be a virtual device, but just that there's nothing else running, in that operating system to give COS service device really full access to the CPU and memory that are allocated to that device. The more CPU and memory that's available to COS service device, the more scalability and performance you're going to get out of it. The thing that's really nice about the COS service device is it also automatically scales. If you give it more memory or more CPU, it takes full advantage of that, where the prior platform was really limited to you know, the resources. Again, it's more secure, and it's not that the TSM or the other environments weren't secure. It's just now that everything is now managed through the DRC Insight portal. So your credentials and your permissions are all managed in that one place. Another thing that is a really nice thing that we've added into the COS service device is that we do support kind of basic round-robin load balancing if you have multiple COS service devices in a pool. You don't need to have a hardware load balancer anymore. You can, but it's not necessary. If you have multiple COS service devices, we will, COS, Central Office Services, will manage all of that balancing for you. Again, the last thing is it does support multiple testing programs. So again, for Wisconsin, that's really nice because you can support the Wisconsin Forward exam and the WIDA Access for ELLs and the WIDA Screener testing programs all now on the same device, so it makes it a lot easier for you to manage. One thing just to note is that if any of your students have accommodations of text-to-speech or video sign language, any of those accommodations, or either of those accommodations, a COS service device is required because those are also very big tests, and so we want to have that content as close to the student as possible. We also get questions, you know, on what's installed when on these servers or devices when I install a COS service device. And there's really 4 things that you're going to see if you go out there and look. And this is just a one snapshot. It's going to vary by operating system, but there's 4 things, services running in the background. One is the content hosting, which is really managing that content request from the student as they're taking the test. The content management is really managing all the content downloads to make sure that all that content is downloaded and managed properly. The relay is managing the configuration and via the communication within the COS service device. So it's managing all that communication and configuration. And it's not really going to apply in most of your sites, but if you needed to do a restricted proxy, and really we direct you to the technology user guide for more information on that. It restricts how students are accessing the internet, typically not something that's going to be needed for the Wisconsin Forward exam, but that's the other installable. It's optional. It still will be there whether you're using it or not. So that wraps up the overview. So now I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about now how to get that COS configuration set up. And we're going to look at this really kind of in 4 different activities. The first thing we're going to walk through is installing the COS service device software on a device. Now again, you may have COS service devices out there already that are already in configurations from last year. Those are going to be good to go. But we have a lot of sites that want to add in additional capacity. So if you either whether you're starting new with new COS service devices, you know, because you didn't have them last year, or if you're adding capacity, you're going to want to go through activity 1. Then we're going to talk about, you know, in activity 2, just a little background on now how do I use Central Office Services to monitor my environment and modify my environment. And then activity 3 is walking through, or excuse me, activity 4 is a little bit more about how to manage things. So activity 1 is to install the COS service device. So the first thing you're going to do is, again, identify preferably a dedicated host, whether it's physical or virtual, using one of the supported operating systems, Windows, Mac, or Linux. And the supported versions, again, always refer back to the system requirements documents for that. So you're going to go into the COS or into the DRC Insight portal to the downloads page and download the appropriate installer to the device and then launch the installer. Once you do that, you're going to see kind of fairly typical wizard that you see when you install other software. You're going to go through, click next, and it's going to give you, information as you progress through the install. Generally about 15 minutes or so is what the entire install is going to take. You're going to get prompted, initially for where you want things to go. We recommend you use the default locations, but it's not required. If you want content in one drive or folder and the source for the operating or for the source code for the COS service device in another, you're fully allowed to do that, to customize your configuration. The other thing is that if you do need to have a proxy host, if your network requires that, there'll be a dialog box in there for that as well. So, assuming that most of you are just clicking through and taking the defaults, the other page you're going to see where you have to actually interact with the installer is for the configuration of service ports. By default, we use 55222 and then the next 3 available ports. Request or require you to test the availability of those ports before you move on. Generally, you're going to get that those ports are available. You're going to click OK, click Next, and you're going to move on in the configuration. If for whatever reason those ports are not available on your device, put in a new base port. It will automatically increment to the next 3 ports. Do a test. As soon as you've got the 4 ports that are available in your environment, click OK and click on Next. The last dialog you're going to see, box you're going to see, is one of these. I've shown all 3 platforms as to what the box looks like between the Windows platform, the Mac platform, and Linux platform. The main thing is to note in all 3 of these is this URL down here. We recommend that you copy and paste that URL for future reference if needed. Generally, you're not going to need it. I'll talk about it in a second as to why you might need it. But copy it and then click Finish. Once you click Finish, the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to go in and take you into the DRC Insight portal and take you into Central Office Services. And in there, you're going to have a couple different options. One is to go through, what you're going to need to do is, why we do that is you're going to need to associate this new COS service device with the COS configuration. So you can either create add it to an existing one, which is a 2-step process, which is what we're going to talk about in activity 2, or if you wanted to start fresh and create a brand new COS configuration, you would go through the 5-step process, and we're not going to talk about that today for the sake of time. But if you wanted to see what that looks like, you can check out the Technology User Guide Volume 2. So we're going to walk through activity 2, which is now associating this new COS service device with an existing configuration. So once you get into the DRC Insight portal, it should launch a page that looks like this. Up here is the device ID that was part of that URL. If for whatever reason that step does not work, just paste the URL that you copied into the browser and click Enter, and it will take you to this page. So that's why, if you had copied that and this didn't show up, you'd have to start the install all over again, because we don't have any reference to that device ID. It's all within that URL. So again, on this page, the device ID is up here. You don't need to know about that. It's all informational. The things you're going to want to note are a couple. One is you're going to need to give that device, or we recommend you give that device a name, because most sites are going to have multiple COS service devices, so to help keep them, distinguish which one we're working with, we really recommend that you give it a name. The other thing that you'll see on this page is a help toggle. The help toggle right now is turned on. It just gives you more text about what to explain kind of more on the page, what is happening. If you toggle that off, just this text goes away. The main thing we're going to want to do after we name it is come down here to the bottom, and we're going to toggle this existing configuration to yes. As you note right now, you can see it's a 5-step process. It defaults to I'm creating a new configuration. We want to go through just the two-step process. So we're going to click this to yes, and then we're going to see the screen change to the two-step process. The device ID is still up here. The name we gave it is still up here. This is toggled to yes, and all we need to do now is click next. When we click next, we go to step 2, and that is, let's find that COS configuration and associate this COS service device to it. So we give you the ability to kind of filter down to find that configuration. So we do that by putting in the testing program, which of course in this case is going to be the Wisconsin testing program. You're going to identify the site, and the site can be either the district site or a location. And really, it's totally up to you as to how you have defined that COS configuration, if it's at a district level or a testing site level. So in this case, it's going to be at a sample district site that we have within the environment. And when you do that, you're going to start typing in the name of that configuration. And as soon as you hit the third letter, a drop down will start to show exactly, narrowing down the different configurations that have that letter configuration, those letters in it. And you select the COS configuration that's already out there. And then once you've selected that, you click complete. And now that COS service device that you just created is now part of that existing configuration. So we will then take you back into the DRC Insight portal Central Office Services application. And before this, you've been kind of running within the wizard of the application. And once you've clicked complete, you're going to go back into the Central Office Services interface, in which case we recommend that you, for this sample configuration that we've created, verify that the locations in that configuration are what you want. In this case, it's got two testing programs in this location, the Wisconsin Forward and the WINA exam. After you verified that, we also recommend you go into content management and verify that that configuration has the right content for what you're going to be using this COS service device in this configuration to test with. So in this case, again, it's got the Wisconsin Forward exam and then the sample items. Over to the right, you indicate whether or not any accommodations are needed for that site. In this case, for sampler, we have the text-to-speech. We don't have video sign language, but for the Forward exam, we've selected both. You're going to click Update Configuration, and now you know that all that content that is necessary for the environment is going to be stored on that new COS service device. For activity 3, we just want to walk through real quick just how you actually use the COS application to kind of manage and monitor your environment. So this is the new COS dashboard. It's been refreshed from last year. It is the main reason we've kind of done it is it provides a lot more information at a glance, and is now also more ADA compliant. So instead of the donuts, we now have bar charts to give you information about the status of the configurations at this site, the status of the COS service devices within those configurations, and the testing devices within those configurations. So in this case, you can see, get a quick, glance to see that there's some COS service devices that haven't been checked in for, the last day or so. And that just means they're probably turned off. So you need to be able to go turn those on before testing starts to make sure that they, are now all checked in. They have the right updated content. You can see that one of these devices right now in this configuration or at this site is updating content. It gives you also, again, information about those testing devices that are part of the configuration about, are they on, are they turned on, or are they gone away? Are they fully functional, or are they out of date from the standpoint of they don't have the most current DRC Insight Secure application on them? The other thing we provide now down the bottom about the specific configurations, COS configurations within this site, we list them all off, we give the org unit ID, and we give a much more visual on are they functioning or not. So we have 4 different statuses, fully functional. As you can see, these are all. If a COS configuration has anything being updated in it, it will show in progress, which means it's being updated. It's has something that's out of date or something that we can't find. So it's a lot easier to be able to take a look at this and get an idea of how things are working. The other thing to note is up here now within the new Central Office Services application is a question mark. So we do more contextual help. So right now, if you have questions about this dashboard, you click that, and a window will open up, and it will take you to a page for under Central Office Services help about the dashboard. You can also navigate through the other tabs that we have to get information. Rather than having to go to the technology user guide, we're putting it right there at your fingertips. The last activity we want to walk through is managing a COS configuration. So now that they're built, how do I, again, manage them as your environment changes? So I'm going to walk through just a couple examples that we get pretty frequently. One is, how do I manage testing programs? Because again, now you can manage multiple testing programs on these COS service devices. So you have Wisconsin Forward COS service devices that you may have used last year. Now you can put WIDA content on there, and I'll show you how to do that real quick. The other is how to manage the content on the within the COS service device. What content am I going to bring down for that testing site? And the last one we're going to walk through real quick is just how to manage testing devices. So to get into a COS configuration, you just click on the name of it. That's going to be a link. When you click on it, it's going to take you to, again, the new interface for managing within Central Office Services. And generally, it's going to take you to the Configuration Information tab. I toggled over right away to Location. That's just going to be a summary of what the configuration is. We're going to go to Locations, and you can see right now this location only has the Wisconsin Forward exam on it. We want to add WIDA to it. So we're going to go up here, and under Testing Programs, we would select WIDA, and then we're going to go and select the actual location for it. And again, I've already done that, and so it's already selected the, in again, our case, the sample district for Wisconsin for WIDA. And you're going to click Add Location. Once you click Add that, you're going to now be able to have the 2 testing programs now show up under Location. And again, location is pretty loosely defined within Central Office Services. A location can be a district, or it can be a testing site, or it can be a group of testing sites. It's totally up to you as to how you have defined locations. But for this case, this location now has the ability to both test Wisconsin Forward and WIDA. If I wanted to remove one, I would click it here and then click Remove, and that testing program would be removed from that location. Once you've added that location, you want to that testing program, you want to go over under Content Management, because the content is not automatically downloaded. You have to tell us what content you want on that COS service device. So in this case, we already had the Wisconsin Forward information there. We're going to either click here, and it's going to select all of them, or you can just individually select the additional WIDA programs you want. In this case, the sampler, the full access content, and then also the screener content. You also note over here, these boxes are grayed out because the WIDA assessment does not have the ability, does not have text-to-speech or video sign language. Again, verify while you're there that you have the right content for the Wisconsin program. You're going to click Update. If you've changed any of this information, you would click Update Configuration, and now that's COS service device the COS service devices within that COS configuration now would have all that content. The last thing I want to step through, again, what we get a lot of questions on, is I need to move testing devices between COS configurations, or I want to distribute via software distribution the configuration name to testing devices. So we'll walk through how to do that real quick. So for number one, the first thing you're going to want to do is know the name of the COS configuration, the org unit name ID that you want to move it to. So this org unit ID right here is the current configuration, COS configuration these testing devices have been associated with. If you want to associate them with a different one, what we're going to do is select those testing devices that we want to move, and then we're going to click on Move. And when we click on Move, you're going to get another dialog box that opens up, and in there we would type in or paste in the name of the COS org unit ID that we want to move these devices to. And then you click Move, and now they are now moved out of this configuration and are now part of the other COS configuration. So we try to make it fairly easy to you for you to be able to move devices around as you manage and change your COS configuration. The other thing that we, again, get questions on is how do I, distribute the ID, the org unit ID, out to devices. And so you go to the Deployment tab and click on Download Configuration and save that file. And then, for how to actually distribute that file out, again, for the sake of time, we would, direct you to the Technology User Guide Volume 3 for actually now how to take that file and leverage your software distribution tool to be able to get the org unit IDs set up on testing devices before testing starts. The other way to do it is as you're building out new testing devices, you can also manually do it one by one. As you're installing the the DRC Insight Secure Applications on testing devices, once it's installed on a device, you can launch it. Once you launched it, you'll get a configuration not found dialog box, because this testing device is not part of a COS configuration yet. You would click on Assign Device to an org unit ID. This dialog box would pop up. You would either type in or paste in the org unit ID, click Add, and then once that's been verified, you would click Register, and now that testing device is now part of the COS configuration. Again, if you have only a few testing devices, this is maybe the way to go. But a lot of sites, when you have multiple testing devices, rather than doing this one by one, you'd want to leverage the software distribution method. The next thing I want to cover is just different ways to configure the COS service device and how to get those for content management. And this is really the basic one, standalone COS service device. It's typically what's used if you're putting them at a location, or if you're setting up multiple COS configurations in even if you're managing them at the district site. Some districts want to still have one configuration per location, and so you would have one COS service device, in that configuration. Fairly common configuration. But we also have districts that are going to be testing a lot of students, and so it's not, even though a COS service device can scale, you want to have some redundancy in the environment, so you put multiple COS service devices in the configuration, and we manage that rotation for you as to where students go. So student 1 would go to the first one, student 2, student 3, and continue to rotate through very basic round robining. There's no sophistication of least used device. It's really around that. So a student will be assigned that COS service device for the duration of the test. Probably more important from a WIDA standpoint, because they'll be interacting, pulling content down throughout the test. For the forward exam, it's really only used really at the very beginning of the test. One thing to note that's very different from the TSM is if a student leaves the test for whatever reason, whether it's planned or unplanned, and they log back in to complete that test session, they can be assigned to any COS service device. They would just be assigned to the next one. They might be assigned to number 1 when they started, and they're going to be in number 3 when they come back in. There is no tie to a COS service device like there was with the TSM. Other thing to note is we still do support hardware load balancing. So if you want in your district to have a lot more sophistication around how you use load balancers, we continue to support that, and that's also documented how to do that within the technology user guide. If in your site you don't have any accommodations, you don't have any text-to-speech or video sign language, and you're not going to be using the environment for any WIDA assessments, you can go without a COS service device in your configuration. In this case, all the content would come from DRC throughout the test, or at the beginning of the test. When the student logs in, the test engine would come down, and all the test content would come down as well. So if you're not, again, if you want to keep things simpler in your environment, and you don't feel you have if you feel like you have the adequate bandwidth to support testing without having content locally, you can go this route. You still need to have a COS configuration, and that COS configuration would still have all the testing devices in it. And because that COS configuration doesn't have a COS service device, it tells the testing devices to get the content from DRC. All right, so we're going to wrap up by talking about all the different support resources DRC provides to help you be successful delivering the Wisconsin Forward exam online. All of this information, we'll talk about that in a second. The information we're gonna walk through, I recommend you take a look at is the site readiness overview. It is about a 5 or 6 page document that just gives you a quick overview of the holistic view of what you need to do to get ready for testing. It's not just technology, there's a lot of people readiness as well. And so we talked through the concept of the steps you need to have in order to be successful online. We walked through the system requirements already. Again, that's a very key resource you're going to want to use. The technology user guides are where we have all the different information about how to install and configure the different various operating systems for the DRC Insight secure applications and the COS service device. Technology readiness checklist, which we'll talk about in a second, the capacity estimator. All of this documentation is really there to help you, for you to be able to reference to help you be successful before and during testing. All of this information is available in 2 places. One is the Wisconsin Forward Exam Technology Requirements site, and then also available within the DRC Insight portal under General Information under the Documents tab. So again, recommend you take a look at the most current documents that we have out there around readiness. So the technology user guide, real quick, it's broken up into 4 volumes to be able to help you manage or navigate through it a little easier based on the topics you're looking for. Note that the document is fairly large, and it's because for each one of these, for the COS service device, we support 3 operating systems, so it walks through the different ways to configure it. If you're only working with one operating system, say Windows, you're only going to be needing to look at that one section. So don't let the size of the document stop you from taking a look at it. It's things you can really narrow down to really quickly to find what you're looking for. And the same thing for the DRC Insight secure applications. There's five sections within it because of the 5 different operating systems. The troubleshooting section or volume is also very handy, quick, frequently asked questions in there, and all the error messages that are associated with testing are all documented and outlined in there as to what they are and any actions you should take based on those. The site technology readiness checklist, we really recommend you take a look at that. even if you've been successfully testing at your site for the last several years, and again, it's also really good for new DTCs to reference. It breaks down really into more manageable pieces what you have to do to get ready for testing online. Things you should be thinking about a couple months in advance, a few weeks in advance, and the day of testing. The one thing also is that you don't have to do these things 2 to 3 months in advance. It just helps you time box that. If you don't do them and it's now 2 weeks out, you still can do them. It just you just maybe have a little bit less window to do it. And we also break it up into categories in terms of what communication we recommend happen at the site, and planning and logistics, from a device standpoint, testing room standpoint, lab standpoint, what you need to do to get testing devices set up, the network set up, and COS configurations, and any training that really should happen. Another tool we provide that sites have found really helpful gives you the ability to kind of estimate what response times are going to be based on the configuration, the number of students you have. So in here you indicate where the content's going to be. If you're using a COS service device, where is it? Is it at the site, or is it at the district level, or you're not going to use one at all? How many students you're going to be testing, and the different types of tests they're going to be taking. How many are going to be starting at the same time? This gets into what I talked about earlier around staggering. You can stagger the students so they're not all taking the test, starting the test at the same time. And then information about your network. Once you have all that in there, it'll update and give you information about what different response times you're going to see when the student launches the DRC Insight Secure application and that test engine comes down, when they start the test, when content comes down, and then during the test, as they're going through it. Sites, again, have found it very useful. This number here is very hard to change once testing started, and this number is probably harder too, but how you actually manage when students are starting testing is something you can play with to help kind of improve these numbers up here for the start of the test. We also provide a quick guide on where to put your COS service devices. It is not a hard and fast rule. It is something that you should look at as just as a guide as to where you might want to put a COS service device based on your network bandwidth and the number of students that site is going to be testing at the same time. This online tools training is generally viewed as targeted to students to help students get on and get familiar with the testing experience before testing starts. And so all students should do this as part of the site technology readiness, but it also is something that we recommend you and other administrators and constituents overseeing testing are also getting in and getting familiar with. So you're seeing what students are going to see when they get in to take the test, so that it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to support them. So we really strongly recommend that you get in there, whether you use the DRC Insight Secure application on the testing device to do it. The other, this is a publicly available URL that you can get into and students can get into at home or on any other testing device to be able to get in and play around with the different navigations and tools that we provide during the test. There's also really another constituent that we really recommend, or stakeholder we recommend get in here is parents, so they can see what the students are going to be, what their testing experience is going to look like. Lastly, the online testing system status page has been refreshed this year. It is a URL that is independent of the DRC Insight portal, because if the DRC Insight portal is having issues, you can't go there to check to see what statuses are. So it's an independent URL, and it gives you information about the online testing environment and the DRC Insight portal. So if there's any issues you're having, one of the nice things to know first is DRC having an issue? If so, we will then provide updates as to where we are with that issue. Right now, this is a snapshot of normal operations. If there was an issue, we would indicate the level of severity of that issue, and then you could click on it to get information about where we are with getting the issue resolved. Lastly, customer service. We are here to support you with any types of questions or issues that you may have during testing or preparing for testing. So give DRC customer service a call for any kind of technology-related questions or issues you have. If you have questions or other staff at your site have questions more about the assessment or policy-related questions, you would give the DPI Office of Student Assessment a call. And Allison and Jennifer's contact information is listed here as well. So really, we're all here to support you to create a smooth testing experience. We're both DRC and DPI are committed to making this as smooth as possible for the district and the school technology, and really most importantly for the students, that they have a really positive testing experience when they sit down to take the Wisconsin Forward test. So with that, we'll wrap up this presentation. Again, note back to future webinars that we're going to be having to take questions throughout this. But again, if you have questions at all about the administration, please don't hesitate to give DRC customer service a call. Thank you.